a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
But no car, not even a US-built Ford F-150, is 100%.
So, Kate, Aaron, it'll be a total of 3,000 jobs being cut at Ford, most of which are in North America. 2,000 jobs for salary positions, 1,000 for agency or contractor positions.
There is no American battery manufacturer. So that makes it a bit more painful and personal when you're getting hit with a pretty heavy tariff on a product for which there is no solution domestically.
Ford is leaving the United States. The company has been forced to leave the same place where it was founded due to the crushing effects of rising tariffs and soaring expenses. The country's most recognizable automaker is being forced to leave. Factories are being turned into ghost towns, and billions of dollars in worth have been lost in what was supposed to be protection for American workers. The destruction is astounding. In 2025, Ford now anticipates losses of more than $1.5 billion. Executives acknowledge that the risks were simply too great and suspended all financial guidance as a result of the devastating blow. Rather than protecting American workers, the tariff regime has left the Midwest in a state of despair and shutdowns. And that raises a more profound query. What hope does the rest of the U.S. car industry have if even Ford cannot thrive under these conditions? Press the like button before we begin. YouTube is informed that this content is important. Overnight, that $86,000 vehicle rises to $103,000. And he will turn to me, that consumer. That's probably what I'll eat. And the workers on the floor, not the CEOs in boardrooms, were the first to suffer the consequences. Instead, the very program that was supposed to protect American workers has destroyed it, making job security a myth. Tariffs have caused a wave of layoffs that have left entire towns struggling to survive rather than preserving livelihoods. Ford has shut down its most recognizable plants in Chicago and Flat Rock, Michigan. In one heinous act, nearly 9,000 workers have lost their jobs, their benefits, and their dignity. 2 out of every 300 jobs in Chicago alone disappeared in a single day. In May alone, an additional 100 were erased at Flat Rock. The silence is deafening to families who have centered their lives on the regular rhythm of these industries. Furthermore, it extends beyond the production lines. Additionally, Ford laid off 350 software developers, an obvious indication that the corporation is sacrificing its technical divisions in order to stop the bleeding. Layoffs in the auto industry as a whole have increased by 12.5%, the most since the epidemic. How much more suffering will American workers have to go through before the illusion is lifted if this is the price of protection? If you've read this far, you might want to subscribe. It's the way we continue to reveal things that others won't. The human cost, however, is only half the picture. Every layoff is motivated by an outdated economic rationale. Due to the cost explosion caused by the tariffs, Ford lost its competitive advantage and American consumers were forced to bear the brunt of the burden. Once freely moving across North America, imported components are now burdened by 25% tariffs, which cause prices to rise by 18% to 32% in a couple of weeks. Ford is spending an additional $491 on each car produced in the US before it is ever placed on the showroom floor. Every automobile that comes off the assembly line now has a financial penalty attached to it, notwithstanding the political pledge made in America. It's a systemic issue. Over 40% of the parts used in Ford automobiles in Michigan come from Mexico and Canada. Additionally, the tax burden is now increased with each border crossing. A once integrated supply chain has become a toll road where profits are drained at each stop. Even economist Arthur Laffer, who was once used to support tariff policies, has cautioned that these charges are making cars more expensive by about $471 per, making them unaffordable. What happens when customers quit purchasing Ford vehicles if it is unable to maintain competitive pricing? Furthermore, the effects go beyond simply raising sticker costs. Ford's most ambitious plans, including the switch to electric vehicles, have been shattered by the cost increase. Ford's flagship T3 electric truck project, which was supposed to serve as the foundation for the company's next generation of clean vehicles, has been put on hold indefinitely due to tariffs and uncontrollable costs. The numbers just don't add up anymore, with production costs skyrocketing above $50,000 per machine, 22% more than first anticipated. The highly anticipated Blue Oval City facility in Kentucky has ceased operations, with its opening postponed until at least 2026. Models that are currently on the market are becoming unaffordable. The price of the Brono Sport has increased by up to $1,500 and the Maverick by $700, while the Mustang make, which is built in Mexico, is now between $1,500 and $2,000 more expensive. The shock is apparent even to those who are not in the EV sector. In April 2025 alone, The average price of a new car in the US increased by 5% to $48,699. Rather of spearheading the transition to the electric age, Ford is lagging behind, allowing rivals in China, Korea, and Europe to take the lead. Who will shape transportation in the future if America's own automaker is unable to sustain its electric vehicle dream? If Ford's domestic counterattack was hindered by increased expenses, the work was completed overseas. It wasn't simply margins that were squeezed by the tariff fight. The corporation was cut off from markets it had spent decades developing when it slammed doors shut across entire continents. Almost immediately, years of investment in international distribution and branding vanished. The hardest hit came from China. It was formerly thought to be Ford's biggest overseas growth market, but it has since turned into a fortress that is closed off. Ford was forced to halt shipments of the F-150 Raptor Mustang Bronco and even the opulent Lincoln Navigator due to import charges that were as high as 1 to 50%. Competitors from Korea and Europe jumped into the void, capturing market share that Ford had worked so hard to gain with their automobiles, which were suddenly cheaper in contrast. Nor did Europe provide a secure refuge. There, importers were forced to choose between retaliatory duties that drove sticker prices above what consumers were prepared to pay and rising transportation costs. Dealers started terminating agreements and moving their purchases to local producers who could ensure steady supply chains and fixed prices. A once profitable export center became a cemetery of unfulfilled orders and deserted storefronts. Emerging markets also started to decline. Brazilian and Asian alternatives were more and more popular among Latin American consumers who were concerned about price fluctuations in the US. Ford used to have a significant following in the Middle East because to its larger models, but price increases caused customer loyalty to crumble, and Japanese competitors entered the market with attractive finance offers. The White House reacted coldly and bluntly. In a single sentence, President Trump disregarded the fallout. Long ago, they ought to have returned production to America. For Ford, however, the message from international markets was even more obvious. Both governments and consumers were moving on. Once a symbol of American strength and reach overseas, the corporation now watched from the sidelines as others occupied the space it was no longer able to occupy. However, the most severe harm may not be apparent in showrooms abroad. It is located inside the production network of North America. Integration factories in Michigan connected to suppliers in Ontario, as well as raw materials imported from Mexico to supply Midwest assembly plants, have traditionally been the backbone of Detroit's power. Once hailed as the epitome of efficiency, that network of relationships is today a burden suffocated by bureaucracy and tariffs. Before it is finished, a single American-made car can traverse the Canada-Mexico border up to 8 times. Now, a new 25% tariff is applied at each border, increasing the cost until profit margins disappear. The economic reasoning that kept U.S. manufacturers competitive has been disrupted by the transformation of what was once a smooth regional system into a maze of taxes and inspections. The reliance is severe for Ford. Its plants use electrical systems from Terry and Precise parts made in Ontario. Time and money have been lost as that pipeline has slowed to a standstill. Jim Farley, the CEO, was blunt in his warning that the program does not generate new jobs. It just results in lost parts, increased expenses, and a double loss. Now, his argument is being made in real time. The weight of delay has caused Detroit's just-in-time logistics system to crumble. Engines, transmissions, and semiconductors are left stuck at checkpoints as trucks that used to traverse countries in a matter of hours now spend days in customs. It has a vicious knock-on effect. In industrial yards, unfinished automobiles are stacked high. Dealerships wait for inventory that never shows up, and workers are sent home unpaid. Even worse, suppliers have been obliged to increase their own search fees due to the uncertainty, as they may experience unexpected disruptions at the border. This indicates that the real cost is not just the tariff, but also the inflationary pressure that permeates every stage of the manufacturing process. Detroit's proud manufacturing lines are now vacant as a result of an inefficient spiral that began as an interconnected advantage. The narrative of Ford's demise is hardly unique. The entire U.S. car industry is being pulled into a catastrophe by this initial domino in a chain reaction. What started out as a targeted tariff experiment has now turned into a systemic disaster that has affected every company. General Motors has already cut its profit projection for 2025, estimating that supply disruptions and tariffs might cost the company up to $5 billion. Stellantis has closed several operations in Canada and Mexico due to the same cost concerns. 900 layoffs resulted from the decision, which reverberated back into the U.S. These Titan suppliers are also falling apart. One of the biggest suppliers of parts in the sector, Lee Corporation, has announced 15,000 job losses globally this year. The same bleak tale is told by the larger market. It is anticipated that U.S. car sales will drop by almost 1 million units to roughly 15 million. Such a decline is not just painful, but also existential for an industry that depends on scale to succeed. The program has expedited collapse across the same sector it was intended to save, rather than restoring American power. Music. The expert's opinion is now evident. What was marketed as a patriotic experiment has turned into a decline roadmap. Instead of safeguarding workers, the tariffs have caused a whole industry to enter a recession, eroding its domestic competitiveness and reputation elsewhere. The average cost of an American car has increased by at least $6,000 due to tariffs alone, which buyers cannot afford, according to Stephen Greenhouse of The Guardian. Inzinga Fessner refers to the policy as a meaningless calculation. Sandra Needy cautions that neither side will gain from this economic conflict. Their combined statements present a devastating image. America's defense of protectionism has become a self-destructive wound. America First has changed into America Isolated First rather than recovering industrial strength. A catchphrase that is now connected to shuttered factories, lost jobs, and a diminished worldwide presence. As the globe watches, friends are questioning if the United States is still a trustworthy industrial partner. What happens if the same experiment is applied to other industries, such as semiconductors, electricity, or even agriculture, given that tariffs have the power to destroy America's most recognizable industry in a matter of months? Are we seeing the start of a long-term slide in U.S. economic leadership, or are we just seeing a short-term setback? Thank you for viewing, and please remember to like and subscribe if this spoke to you. The truth is fueled by each.